Hi there. Today we are with Ali Benedetti. Ali teaches 7th and 8th grade humanities at iLEAD Agua Dulce. And today we're going to be talking about a project that she did with her social studies learners, her 8th grade social studies learners, called Broken Laws. Really exciting project. Ali, thanks for joining us. So let's start here. I'm always curious what a facilitator's mindset is, what their why is. What were you thinking when you created this project, Broken Laws?
Well, I really wanted to create a project that made the Constitution relevant to the learners. I remember studying the Constitution when I was back in middle school, and it was so dry and boring, memorizing dates and who signed it, but I never really understood the importance and how it connected to me today. I wanted the learners to really look at the meaning behind the words and use the knowledge to create a law or a bill or even an amendment to a current law or bill that would help make society more just for everyone. I wasn't quite certain on how to proceed in the distance learning environment, so I turned to PBL Works where I found a project called Broken Laws. I read through the project and it was so amazing and completely in line with what I was trying to do that I utilized their resources and edited them to better fit our learners' needs and what I really wanted them to focus on.
Ali, I love that. I've always said that the best teachers are good thieves, right? There's no reason we need to recreate the wheel. Go out and explore and find projects online. Now, of course, no project is going to roll perfectly into our classroom. So I love that you adjust it for your kids' needs. You might find a project that's for elementary school that you can scale up to your middle school, or for high school that you can scale down. I love that. And yeah, PBL Works is a great resource. So I'm going to go ahead and share your project board. That's your podcast. There's your project board. So why don't you start? This is your Power School classroom. Awesome. Why don't you tell us what the driving question was, and then we'll get into the nuts and bolts of your project.
Of course. Our driving question is how can we change the law to make our society better for everyone?
I
Yes.
love how authentic it is. So important. One of the key drivers of engaging project-based learning is making it authentic. You're right. The parchment that the Constitution was written on is just as dry and crusty as the content can be until we make it real for our kids and authentic. Love that. All right. So talk to me about your project. What did your kids do? How did this develop?
So we started the unit where they had to do an escape room and they had to break free from the Revolutionary War. And it was interactive with these wonderful pictures, and they really enjoyed that. And then we jumped right into the Constitution, and we spent 4 class periods where we broke down the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and the amendments, reading through them and picking scenarios and seeing what rights were being violated in these scenarios. So they had to really understand what was going on in the wording of the Constitution and the Bill of Rights and the other amendments. Like, it's dry and it's hard to understand. So I wanted them to be able to make those connections. They also studied the different branches of government and how a bill becomes a law, both federally and locally. And they made the connection with how it's different by our state in California and federal. And then after which the learners worked with their thought partner to identify a local, state, or federal law or bill that they felt needed to change, or they created a new law that they wanted to propose. So their thought partner and them, they didn't need to have the same law, but they were there to engage in conversation, and they were their person that they could check with them if something was sounded right or help them find resources. So that was their person to always turn to. And their goal in this project was to take action and get support for their proposed new or amended law. So after they researched and they wrote their argumentative essays, they then used their writing to create a segment for the podcast where they would share their persuasive message with the public. The proposed legislation was completely learner chosen and researched.
That is awesome. And I'm looking at your project board here. You've got everything there. You've got your driving question front and center, and then you've got all these different resources, the essential questions, vocabulary, outcomes, rubrics, standards, calendars, everything that your learners and their parents are going to need Fantastic. Now, one of the biggest challenges of project-based learning in a distance learning model is, okay, our kids did a highly engaging project, but we need to make it authentic through that presentation of learning. How did your kids present?
So we spent a couple of classes recording their podcast, and then we edited it together to where they uh, liked how it flowed. They picked their own intro music and their out music, and I made the introduction and the outgoing message, but everything else was their choice. So we launched through Anchor because it is a free podcast source who puts our message on other podcast sites. So it's on Spotify, so people can listen on Spotify, and it's all free. So it was a beautiful source for us to use because teachers need free.
Right?
And they were allowed to make their podcast however they felt comfortable. It just had to be a persuasive message. So some of the learners chose to just do it in speech format where they introduced themselves and they said what they were doing and what they wanted to change. Some of them did it in an interview format like this, where one of their thought partners asked them questions and they answered. And some of them had a conversation. So if you listen to the first, in episode 1, the first podcast with Samantha and Tate, they are having a conversation back and forth because they actually chose the same law that they wanted to change, but they actually wrote differently in their essays. One of them thinks that nothing should be dumped in the ocean, and the other one has exceptions to the rule.
That's really interesting. I love this. And if our viewers are interested in listening to the podcast, you can see the URL there, anchor.fm/broken-laws. I actually listened to the first episode yesterday. I'm looking forward to the second episode today. The kids did a really good job. I'm looking at your logo here. You've got the iLEAD logo, you've got the title of your project, and it's an old-timey microphone. That is so cool. Where did you find that?
That was actually learner created by one of our 8th graders, Sam Diem. It's beautiful and wonderful, and it was so impactful, and the learners looked at it and they were like, that's amazing. So we decided to use that as our logo, and we used it on the invitation that we sent out to the parents to listen and everything.
So cool. And what an amazingly authentic way to present to an authentic audience in a COVID 2020 world, right? And then you also set up a website for your kids. Look at how tight that is. That is so awesome. Talk to me a little bit about your website.
So we were discussing, the learners and I, and we decided that we really wanted their listeners to be able to see everything that they had worked on, because the podcast is a small portion of all the work that they did. So we put on the main page the invitation to go to. There's links to the ways that they can listen and a little blurb about what they did, so that people can understand where it is coming from. And then we put our information page on there too. The learners thought that it would be really nice for them to see where their project came from and why they were doing this. And then on each of the pages, so if you click on episode 1 on this side, you can go and see all the learners that participated, and you can click on their actual papers so that you can read their essays and see their full arguments that they were proposing. And our listeners can take a brief survey on how the podcast went, because when we come back from the break, the learners are going to be reflecting on the surveys that were reflections of their podcast.
So cool. So this presentation of learning is actually going to continue to take place during the holidays. And then the reflection takes when the kids, Allie, this is beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing with us. And what I'm going to do, the URL is actually a little bit complicated for the website, but you're viewing this on YouTube. So take a look down here in the comments. I've got the link to the website if you're interested there. And hey, click there, take that survey, help Allie's kids reflect on this project. Allie, again, thanks so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. Nicely done. Keep up the good work.
Thank you so much.